Titan Forged have impacted the history of Azeroth more than almost anything else. While we have covered their role within the ordering of the world and the prisons they fashioned, we will now at last see that metal and stone can be as fallible as flesh. Don't forget to like and subscribe and come. Take a seat by the fire as we embrace the whispers from below. The eldritch horrors may be bound beneath the mantle of the world, but they are not content to remain so, as we will see. We journey to one of the prison complexes in the icy north of the continent. Beneath these frozen peaks lies one of the most dangerous of the old gods, Yogg-Saron. His madness would not stay sealed away for long. The prison, named Ulduar, is given protection equal to the threat within. Led by the chief jailer and prime designate of the Titan Forged Loken. Under his command, the other keepers and many watchers would continue the Titan's work from the ever-growing facility. Around this time, Agramar, the Titan, had finally reached the rest of the Pantheon. Still greatly wounded, he was determined to warn the others of Sargeras's betrayal, and now the burning legion he had created. They were outraged, but they would not give up on their champion just yet. Prepared for the worst, the Pantheon finally confront the legion at the planet Nihilum. The High Father and leader of the Pantheon, Aman'Thul, would attempt to reason with Sargeras, attempting to sway him from his course. They tell him of a world soul named Azeroth they had discovered, one strong enough to oppose the corruption he foresaw. Despite having fought the last time they met, Agramar attempted to reason with Sargeras one final time. This would be his undoing. In a moment of grief and rage, Sargeras cleaved the wounded Titan in two. The rest of the Pantheon, incensed by this act, charged in an all-out assault against him and his legion. The battle was so fierce that the planet was scarred for all time, its very rock hardening to an unstable yet indestructible metal. Ultimately, the fell might of the Mad Titan proved to be too much. He would kill each and every one of the Pantheon that he once swore to protect. Norgannon, however, had woven a spell that allowed the spirits to survive, hurtling them across the universe to safety. Most of the Pantheon spirits would seek refuge in their former creations on Azeroth. This created an energy surge unlike anything the Keepers had felt before. It overwhelmed their senses, and albeit temporarily shut them down. It was only the Keeper Ra, who presided over a different Titan facility to the south, that understood what had happened. Upon receiving the spirit of Aman'Thul, he believed that the Pantheon were dead. Now grieving, he retreated from the world. He gave up hope in favour of seclusion. Meanwhile, at Ulduar, the Dark God sensed the disturbance, and would strike with the speed of a viper at the minds of his jailers. He used all of his strength he could muster to reach out. It was not enough to assert control, but he had the desired effect nonetheless. It began with Loken, who at the time was having an affair with the wife of his brother Thorin. The thought of losing her overwhelmed his senses, and in the confusion his addled mind struck out, a blind rage that could not be subdued. He killed her, and after the act, his thoughts became his own again, and he looked on in horror at what he had done. He knew that should he be discovered, his life and all he had worked for would be forfeit. He could not let this happen, even if it meant using the power of the old gods to do so. His deception began with lies to his brother Thorin. He convinced him that Sif was murdered by Angrim, the king of the Frost Giants, and long-time ally of Thorin. This would spark a brutal war between them, one that Loken centered himself as the savior by forging a new army to settle the dispute. Paranoia was growing within him, however, clouding his every decision, the mad god laughing at what he had wrought. In this state, Loken began to fear being discovered by the other keepers, and he would have to act fast. He succeeded in a plot to murder the keeper Mimiron, an innovative genius, his mechanome minions later rebuilding him, well, mostly. He convinced the now subjugated Helya to imprison Odin within his own halls of valor, helping her to unleash vengeance upon him for what he had done in making her the first Valkyr. The other keepers one by one fell to the corrupted influence of Yogg-Saron. Ra was still in seclusion and bereft of any care to intervene. Only Tyr and Arcades were free, but were mostly unaware of what was taking place. The other Titan Forged were banished from the grounds of Ulduar to roam the continent of Kalimdor, no longer with the purpose and guidance of the Keepers. Like a cloying mist, silence fell over the complex. Yogg-Saron's entire will was bent on keeping the tenuous grip he had made for himself over these once mighty beings. The Titan Forge that now called these lands home existed together in peace for many ages. But it could not last forever, as darker forces sought dominion. It was two of Loken's creations that looked upon these lands and saw the opportunity to conquer them. Ignis and Vulcan were two fire giants, and if they were to follow their desires to rule, they would need an army. First, they took control of a fierce warrior clan of Vrykul known as the Winterskorn by force. But this was only the beginning. The fire giants moved quickly, awakening the Vrykul's battle lust, working the forgers ceaselessly to create weapons and armor to fit them with. Soon after, they marched this army forth, first to the peaceful earthen in their underground lair, and thus began the Winterskorn War. While this was taking place, the old gods are never content with one possibility. Instead, these eldritch beings see all possibilities at once. Yogg-Saron, even with his strength occupied in keeping down his jailers, would have a gift for the Titan Forged. This gift is probably the single most impactful event in Azeroth's history. It would cause the metal and stone Titan Forged to turn to flesh, vulnerable and mortal, but it would grant them more free will and the ability to procreate. The curse of flesh, as it would be recorded by the Keepers, began to spread like a wildfire throughout all of the Forged. Ignis and Vulcan were keenly aware of this. As their forces became flesh, they could not rely on the strength of the Winterskorn alone. The Keepers Tyr and Arcades learned of these events from a group of earthen that had fled their homes and came to ask for aid. Along with a watcher named Ironaya, they went to investigate what was happening in the northern reaches. They helped the earthen push back the Winterskorn, but the fire giant armies were vast and ever-growing. They had now begun constructing golems in their image to aid in the war effort, and even subjugating proto-dragons and riding them into battle. It would prove too much for the Keepers alone, and so Tyr reached out to his allies in the Dragon Isles for aid. The Aspects arrived, and were enraged at the devastation they saw. Together, they defeated this Titan-forged army using their powers in perfect unison. Ysera and Nosdormu then wove a spell, one that would encapsulate the Titan Forged in a dreamless sleep. They would not know the comfort of the dream or any true rest, as they were placed in underground facilities to wait out their days. Tyr had suspected by now that Loken may have fell to corruption, and so devised a plot to steal the discs of Norgannon. These discs were the transcription of the entire history of events on Azeroth. They could use the information within to combat this threat, devise a way to regain control. While Tyr went to face Loken and reason with him, his allies gained access to the discs and fled. Loken, upon discovering the discs were stolen, quickly sent out two of the most nightmarish creatures of Yogg-Saron to kill Tyr and his allies and retrieve the discs. As they were making their way south to seek refuge in another facility named Uldaman, they came to rest in a quiet glade. It was in this very glade that the two horrific Sathraxi generals named Zakaj the Corruptor and Kithix caught up with them. Tyr would stand his ground and fight, but he bid his allies to continue fleeing south with the discs. They also had a contingent of Titan Forged, some of them suffering the curse of flesh, and with that they needed protection. For countless days and nights the mighty Keeper Tyr fought back the terrors, neither one gaining ground. It was in these moments that Tyr knew he could not do this forever, and his foes showed no signs of breaking. Instead, he would sacrifice his life to save the others, channeling what remained of his energy into an explosion that instantly killed Zakaj and gravely wounded Kithix, forcing it to flee west. He would be remembered forever and revered by those he gave his life for. The others would retreat to Uldaman and seal themselves away from the world. Once again, peace fell over the world like a shroud, but it would be short-lived, as we will see in the next episode. So I'd just like to thank you all again, and don't forget to come back anytime.